Hi guys, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are getting back into a series that I kind of put on the back burner, and that is doing an in-depth review and analysis of some 5-star fantasy books. I have previously done The Will of the Many, the Farseer trilogy, and the Devabad trilogy, and I am actually going to do another Shannon Chakraborty book today, and I'm really excited to talk about it because this is my favorite time of year, summer, and one of my favorite things about summer is reading pirate fantasies, so I thought this was a perfect time to talk about The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. But before I get into that, if you would like to join us reading some pirate fantasy, we are reading The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker over on the Fable app in our book club, The Appendix. It has been a really interesting book so far. It is cutthroat pirates, and they almost speak like a whole other language. It is a very immersive experience. So if you want to check that out, definitely check out the link tree below to get to the Fable app. But I am really excited to get into this. Obviously, I am in like my summer vibes with my colorful clothes, and I don't usually rock like a pigtail hairstyle to space buns, but I thought I'd do something fun today. But as you are letting me know how you're doing in the comments and everything, I am going to get into this in-depth analysis. So before I jump in, this is a spoiler-free review. I just want you to know that. But this is probably one of the best, if not the best, pirate fantasy book that I have read. I have read a number. I don't think I've read like, I haven't read like 50 or anything like that. But I think I've read a decent amount to be able to say that I am a connoisseur of pirate fantasy. If you like the idea of a swashbuckling adventure, but you want something a little bit different, this is going to be the book for you. We have a middle-aged female main character, and this isn't a Eurocentric pirate fantasy. This is taking place in a Middle Eastern inspired world. So it's kind of like our world, but there is magic, and I will get more into that in a little bit. But if you like the sound of that, The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi is definitely going to be for you. I was so excited when this book was announced because I had read her series, the Devabad trilogy, and that was such a special series for me. It got me back into reading as an adult, and it was just reading fantasy that wasn't the typical fantasy, exploring different cultures and religions and politics. And I feel like we definitely get a taste of some of that. This is kind of the same world as her Devabad trilogy, but you don't have to read that in order to read this. There are some elements that carry over, and having read the Devabad trilogy first, I feel like I had a little bit more like Easter egg experience, but I don't think it's essential or anything. This is definitely its own entity. I have just really loved Chakraborty's writing, and this is actually the first of a series. She has, I believe, according to Goodreads and what I've seen other places on the internet, she has a deal for a trilogy, and she is currently, according to her social media, editing the second book. So yes, I am following the updates for what is going on with this series because I am just that excited about getting the sequel. So she has written it and I think has like done an edit of this like first draft. I'm really hoping that by like 2026 we will possibly get the book. I don't know, but I don't want to rush a good thing. I would much rather have a well-crafted story, but I do want it as soon as possible. So a little bit more about Chakraborty. So this being a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy, we do have elements of Islam in here, and that is also related to our main character. And that is definitely a big element with Chakraborty's books. She is a convert to Islam, and she is very well learned when it comes to like ancient Middle Eastern history, and she shares a lot of her resources on her social media, even on her website. She, I believe, cites things in this book as well, and it is just so fascinating to me how well researched it is, and you really get the feel of that because it just is so like bigger than life, like this epic mythological sort of lore that is in here, and it just makes the book that much more special. So if you like the idea of that kind of writing where it feels like almost like a historical fantasy, but you want pirates, you want the Middle East, like it is such a beautiful combination of things. And I like that she talks about religion She's not really like shoving anything down your throat. It's just more of like how we should respect everyone's beliefs, and we can all think different things, and it just it's just done really well. But that is a little bit about Chakraborty and what is coming with these books. So let's do just kind of an overview and a little bit like details of the book itself. I'm not going to hold the book up the whole time, but I'm going to give you a little bit of stats on it. So like I said, it's part of a planned trilogy, and this is a historical pirate fantasy. This came out in 2023, so there has been a little bit of time. I don't know, again, when the next book is going to come out, but she is working on it. And the page count of this book, just so you know what you're getting into, it's around like 490 pages. So it is like a decent sized fantasy, but it's not like, you know, a Brandon Sanderson that's like 1,000 pages long. And then when it comes to the audiobook, that is around 17.5 hours. And it's narrated by, I might say this wrong, Lamisi Isak. And I personally didn't read the audiobook, but my husband did, and he said that it was done really well, so I trust his opinion on that. So if you would like either experience, I think if you really want more of like the visual experience with some of the references that are made, like there's some like inserts to like historical references and stuff like that, you might want to see more of that visually. But it is a very much like conversation, someone telling a story, and if you would rather have that like auditory experience, I feel like you're going to get something from each version of reading the book. And I am obsessed with this cover. It is so like colorful and just very unique. I love like the monster wrapping around the ship. I love the color of the water. It's so fantastic. And like yellow and blue, like those colors are like some of my favorite colors. Obviously I'm wearing yellow. So it's just a gorgeous cover. And this actually was a finalist for the 2024 Hugo Award. So if that tells you anything, I feel like, you know, that is definitely a prestigious award. And just to even be a finalist, I feel like is a very honorable thing. So this is definitely like writing quality, and it's definitely something that I nerd out about is Chakraborty's writing. All right, let's get into what this is really about, getting more into the meat of the synopsis. So Amina Al-Sirafi is a middle-aged retired pirate who has become a mom, and she's just kind of living her life. And then someone comes and offers her basically a fortune to go and rescue a missing person, and they are basically drawn into that one last deal. It definitely is like that kind of classic trope. It's like just one more job and we're gonna be done. It definitely has that feel to it, and I really love that kind of story. But when Amina is basically pulled into this job, she's pulled back into her old world of just chaotic pirate adventures, and it just has a classic feel to it, but is still bringing this new energy with presenting it in a different culture and with a middle-aged female character. But we have like her former crew on her really legendary ship, the Marawati, and we get pulled back into the world of like magic and demons and old enemies and weird political schemes. Like there is so much going on in this, and it just makes it that much more fun. But as they're getting into the adventure, it kind of becomes more than what they thought it was going to be. And it is just such a chaotic fun time. So you could describe this as like Pirates of the Caribbean with like her Daevabad trilogy. So basically the Middle Eastern like mythology and folklore and legendary magic with Pirates of the Caribbean, which is bringing like humor. There is a lot of humor in this, but there still are really high stakes. So if you like the shenanigans of pirate stories, but still want the high stakes adventures, you're going to get both of that in this book. let's get into the world building. So like I've said, this is a Middle Eastern inspired world and very much set in Chakraborty's Devabad world, but we are basically in the Indian Ocean, and we are kind of like sailing around the coasts along the Indian Ocean. So I will definitely give you a map to kind of demonstrate where this is taking place, but it's like a magical version of our world, but this is like medieval Middle Eastern time period. And this is pulling from like Islamic history, Middle Eastern history, and their folklore and mythology. And like I said, Chakraborty kind of gives some of those references and everything. And this also has like a lot of maritime culture in it, obviously, since we're dealing with pirates and sailing the high seas. I just really like the blend of like real world history along with like mythological lore and magic. Like I said, we have demons, we have jinn, we have like secret societies. So there's some really interesting magic going on in here. And again, it not being a Eurocentric pirate fantasy, I just feel like makes it that much more of a rich experience because we're learning new folklore that we might not be familiar with. I think when it comes to pirate fantasy, there's very much, you know, like we think Treasure Island and Pirates of the Caribbean, but that's all like centered around things that are very like European influenced and things like that. And this being Middle Eastern, we're dealing with like a whole different kind of mythology and folklore. And I feel like it is just such a cool experience to get to learn about those things. And a lot of this is really communicated through the really vivid descriptions that Chakraborty gives. We have, of course, like ports and ships, and even down to like the clothing and like the markets that they go to, even just like the weather, like it all is very much, building up this very descriptive image that you can picture in your mind of like a Middle Eastern port, and even just like the style of the ship and the clothing that they wear. Like it is all just creating this really immersive experience and really adds to the world building. The world just feels really lived in and grounded. It definitely has a rich like spiritual culture, but I feel like the magic of this world and like the customs and traditions, it's all not just like there for the sake of being different. It's done like seamlessly blending into the religion and superstitions and the history of this world, and it's just done in a very grounded way. The writing style. I know I've already said that I love Chakraborty's writing, and this book is really formatted in a unique way. So it is like Amina like retelling her stories, but somebody else is dictating them. So it feels kind of like someone's storytelling, but it's also like reading somebody's journal at the same time. A lot of this is Amina's first person narration, and she is very witty and sarcastic. She's very self-aware, but this also has kind of like a confessional feel to it, like a tell-all basically. And it is just a really unique way to tell a story, and it just feels very like raw and like you're having somebody tell you this long like memoir style story of their life. And again, it is being dictated by another character, so we do have some commentary from this like unnamed scribe character, and that definitely creates some like mystery and intrigue with the story as well. So it's really interesting kind of having this like combination of like first person narration and secondary character commentary. And again, Chakraborty's writing is very well researched, and I just kind of nerd out about it. Like I just love that aspect of her writing, and the fact that she shares all of her references. She'll share just like history books that she's reading on her social media and things like that. You can find, like I said, all of this stuff on her website. It is just so fascinating to me, and I have not personally gotten into all of that, but just seeing, and you definitely experience it in the writing, just how well researched this is and all of the mythology that's put into it. It definitely feels like someone is very knowledgeable, but it's not just like reading history. It definitely comes to life on the page in this magical story. The character work in this book is really fantastic. And of course, Amina being our main character, we get a lot of her character work, and the dynamic character that she is, but we also have some fantastic side characters as well, especially with her found family kind of crew. But let's get into Amina. Amina is a very fierce woman. She is very complicated, and I really like that she is an older protagonist. I feel like we don't see that very often. And she is a mother and a former pirate, so there's kind of this duality within her. And she's very loyal to her family. She wants to take care of her family and protect them. But in doing that, a lot of her past kind of comes back to haunt her. There's a lot of consequences to things that she's done in the past. So it kind of unravels, unfolds as the story goes, and it is definitely an intriguing story. I feel like Chakraborty demonstrated really well how multifaceted a woman can be through Amina, because we have her being like this soft and caring mother, but she's also this like fierce and cutthroat pirate. And then she's a really loyal friend to her crew members. And then we have just kind of the morally gray aspect of her personality. So there's a lot going on within her, but I feel like that's a really realistic picture of any person. We all have different aspects of our personality and things that have shaped us, and I just feel like it's crafted really well. And her crew is such an amazing cast of characters. They all have their unique personalities and backstories, and they each have a different relationship with Amina, and I feel like that definitely made the characters feel real as well. I apologize if you can hear thunder as I'm talking, but what I am referencing, not just like the general crew on Amina's ship, but the core group, this kind of like ragtag gang of crew that sailed with Amina in the past before she retired, and she's kind of like getting the gang back together. And we have really unique characters. We have basically like poisons expert, and then we have someone who's kind of a kleptomaniac, but they're like a really good marksman. And then we have this kind of like pious, sort of snobby scholar who is our navigator, and they all just bring something really unique to the table, and I love seeing them interact with each other and Amina. It is absolutely hilarious. And within the crew and some of the other characters that come into play, we do have queer representation, including a trans character who is like kind of transitioning in the book, and it is a really unique read, and I'm really glad we have that representation. There is also a chaotic demon character, and he definitely brings chaos to the story. He's kind of snobby and really particular, but he's also really mysterious and dangerous, and he definitely plays a unique role in the story. I don't want to give anything away, but just, you're not ready for him. I'll just say that. I think Chakraborty uses her characters really well to explore different themes. In this one, I feel like there's a lot of talk with like motherhood, faith and legacy and identity, and I want to get a little bit more into those. I feel like motherhood is a very rare topic to be discussed in fantasy, and especially like pirate books, and I really like how Amina is portrayed as this mother who really cares for her daughter, but she does have this past, and she does have, you know, these other elements in her life, but her priority is her daughter, and I just feel like it's explored in such a beautiful way, and I just really love seeing that aspect of Amina's character. With faith and identity, I definitely feel like Chakraborty does a really good job of discussing this with a lot of care and nuance. Amina does consider herself Muslim, and like faith and religion is discussed in the book, but not in like a weird or confrontive way. I feel like it definitely talks about how there were these different conflicting religions at the time in the Middle East, like in medieval times, and I feel like that was a really interesting discussion. It's not a huge part of the book by any means, but it definitely brings a unique like cultural aspect to the book. And we do have like kind of discussion of like aging and the legacy that we leave. You know, Amina is a 40-year-old character, and, you know, that's not very common. And it's just kind of seeing someone, like, look at their life and see, like, what am I putting out as far as, like, what I'm leaving for the future? You know, what have I left in my past? And it just has a really interesting discussion about aging and how we go about life and the choices that we make. Now, we have some really interesting villains in this story. They are very multi-layered. They're not necessarily like totally evil. It's like they don't always do evil for evil's sake. They may have like good intentions, but uh, they're still doing something bad. So it's very interesting villains in here, and it definitely gets into some high stakes situations. But as far as the character work as a whole, I think my favorite thing is just the really dynamic relationships that are in this book, especially between Amina and her crew and her love for her daughter. Like, it's just really beautiful relationships that have a lot of depth to them. I love found family, and I feel like there's a really good example of it in this book. So if you like found family and just really beautiful friendships, you're definitely going to like this book. All right, let's get down to the brass tacks. The story progression and the fantasy tax. If you have not been around long enough to know what the fantasy tax is, it's something that I just kind of use to describe the price that you have to pay in order to kind of get into the world of a fantasy book. So basically, is this going to be like kind of lower world building where it's easy to understand? Or is it going to be like high intensity where it's like I'm pretty much learning a new language and it's something I'm totally unfamiliar with, complex magic? That's basically the gist of it. So with this one, I feel like we have a medium fantasy tax. I say medium due to like the story flow and the dense world building that we have. With the story flow, it is a little bit slow in the beginning, just as we're like establishing characters and the world and things like that. But once we get into the quest, it is cooking. So it's just, it requires a little bit of patience. I don't think it's too bad, but I have seen people say that it was a little bit slow in the beginning. I was hooked from the beginning, but that's just me. I have seen other people say that it was a little bit slow. So just be aware of that. It definitely is like cooking more when we get into the quest. The world building can be a little bit dense. I'm not going to lie to you. There are a lot of terms, there's a lot of names, there's a lot of historical and cultural history and references, but I feel like it's scaffolded well where you just kind of gradually learn and build, and I don't think it's too difficult to understand. There are times when we're getting into some of the references, like it'll be at like the beginning of a chapter where it's talking about like a mythological god and things like that, where I did have to do some separate research just for my own personal understanding. I just was not understanding the reference that was being made, but that, again, that was just me. But I personally thought that was kind of cool, like getting to learn more about an actual like mythological system. That aspect of it could seem like a little bit daunting to people, but I personally ate it up. So. And like I said, this is kind of based in the world of her Daevabad trilogy, where it is like based in like the Middle East, but like a magical version of the world. And there are elements that carry over, like different creatures and just like cultural things. But again, you don't need to read Daevabad in order to understand. Some other details that might factor into the fantasy tax for you is we have like non-linear storytelling. So we are kind of going into some backstory, looking back into the past, coming back to the present. And I didn't really think it was that daunting, but for some people it could be, I don't know. We also have like, Amina can be a little bit chatty and kind of meander as she's talking and kind of take some deviations, but I personally found it entertaining. If that would be something that would deter you, like we're not just totally staying on track with the story. It's nothing major. It's not major, but just a detail to possibly be aware of. So basically, the payoff is going to be awesome. You know, you might have to kind of get through the world building, which is typical for most like higher fantasy books. But again, the payoff is going to be amazing. You're going to get this really layered story, and the ending is crazy, and I absolutely love it. All right, so my final thoughts on this book is that it's amazing. It is absolutely incredible. I love it with my whole heart. I remember reading this and just feeling like this is what a pirate fantasy should be. It just had the classic feel of like pirate, like high seas adventures and shenanigans, the humor. There's definitely like monsters and creatures and mythological folklore. Like, there is crazy magic. It just has all of the elements that I want, and it's all well balanced. And I just ate it up. Like, I read it pretty quickly. I think I read it in like 2 or 3 days. I was just like glued to the book, and it normally takes me about a week to maybe get through like a bigger fantasy book like that. I know I say this is 5 stars, but I definitely think this could be on my 6-star level books. I haven't weighed that out yet, but it is definitely a 5-star for sure. As far as people I would recommend this to, I would definitely recommend to readers who like pirate fantasy, but definitely like high fantasy, and people that want a pirate fantasy, historical fantasy that isn't Eurocentric. I think I have drilled that in pretty well, but just if you want something that isn't the typical pirate fantasy, but still has that classic high seas adventure feel. Would I consider continuing the series? I think I've already answered that, but I absolutely am chomping at the bit for the sequel to this book. Like I said, I am keeping up with Chakraborty's updates, and you can go follow her on Instagram. She shares on her stories and her posts. She is sharing tidbits from, you know, history books. She also shares like fan art, which I think is super cool if you're into that. And she gives updates about where she is with the writing. So I just really like that. It makes me feel connected to the process. And if you like the idea of that as well, definitely go follow her on Instagram. Did this remind me of other books and stories? This definitely just reminds me of like a classic pirate story with, you know, pirate shenanigans and things like that, definitely with the humor, but also has the like magical pirate stories with like, you know, mystical folklore and things like that. So it's not just like a historical pirate fantasy. I definitely would think, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean, where there's a little bit of like mystical magic in there. It does have that classic feel to it, but in a Middle Eastern context. All right, guys, that is going to be it for the Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of in-depth look at the book. I am definitely excited to get more of this story. And if you have read this, definitely let's chat in the comments. I want to hear your opinions. I definitely am recommending this book to other people, and I'm curious to see if you feel the same about it. You know, I've seen a mixture of opinions about it. I don't know if it's necessarily for everybody, but the people that like it really, I think, love it. They don't just like it. So I definitely think it could be maybe a little polarizing just because of the like density of the world building, but I am definitely curious to hear your opinion, so let's definitely chat in the comments. And if I convinced you that you need to put this on your TBR or it needs to be your next read, definitely let me know. I am really excited whenever somebody is like, yeah, I totally want to read this. So let me know if I convinced you to read it. But that is going to be it for me today. I will see you guys very soon, and have a good one. Bye.